The Vanishing Village. I'd always been drawn to stories that defied explanation, tales that made the hair on the back of your neck stand on end. So when whispers of a remote village where people had been mysteriously disappearing reached my ears, I knew I had to investigate. The name of the village, Ebonwood, was as ominous as the rumors surrounding it. The journey to Ebonwood was arduous, involving winding roads that seemed to lead nowhere, dense forests that blocked out the sun, and a pervasive sense of isolation. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, casting long, eerie shadows across the cobblestone streets. The villagers eyed me with a mix of suspicion and fear. It was as if my very presence had disrupted some fragile balance. I made my way to the village inn, hoping to find some answers. The innkeeper, a burly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, greeted me with a grunt. His eyes were wary, and he seemed reluctant to engage in conversation. After settling into my room, I approached him, trying to ease into the topic of the disappearances. "We don't talk about it," he said gruffly when I mentioned the rumors. "Best you leave it alone, stranger." Over the next few days I explored Ebonwood, trying to glean any information I could from the wary villagers. They were a superstitious lot, always glancing over their shoulders and muttering about an ancient curse. It wasn't long before I learned the full story from an elderly woman named Agnes, who seemed less fearful than the others. "The curse was placed on this village centuries ago," she explained in a hushed voice, her eyes darting around as if she feared being overheard. "A wronged witch cast it, vowing that the people of Ebonwood would pay for their cruelty. Every so often, someone vanishes, taken by the curse. We don't know where they go, only that they never return." I spent my nights poring over old village records and ancient texts, searching for any clues that might help me break the curse. The village library, a dusty, dimly lit building, became my second home. The librarian, a stooped man named Thomas, was surprisingly helpful, guiding me to the oldest and most obscure texts. One night, while deep in my research, I felt it. A presence, cold and malevolent, seemed to wrap around me, whispering dark promises in my ear. I knew then that the curse had taken notice of me. Strange phenomena began to plague me: flickering lights, disembodied voices, and an overwhelming sense of dread. My dreams were haunted by visions of shadowy figures and a suffocating darkness. With Agnes's help, I discovered an old ritual that might break the curse. It required the bones of the witch who had cast it, buried in a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of the village. We gathered the necessary items: candles, herbs, and a dagger inscribed with ancient runes. The villagers watched us with a mix of hope and fear, placing their trust in us to end their suffering. We made our way to the cemetery under the cover of darkness, hoping to avoid the watchful eyes of whatever malevolent force was behind the curse. The cemetery was a desolate place, overgrown with weeds and shrouded in an unnatural fog. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and an eerie silence hung over the place, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. We found the witch's grave, a crumbling headstone marking her resting place. The inscription was barely legible, worn away by centuries of neglect. Following the instructions from the ancient texts, we performed the ritual, chanting the incantations and burning the offerings. Agnes's voice was strong and steady, her years of experience with the village's folklore evident. As we completed the final steps, a deafening silence fell over the cemetery. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, a wail echoed through the night, a sound of pure anguish and rage. The ground trembled, and the fog lifted, revealing a spectral figure hovering above the grave. It was the witch, her eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. "You dare to break my curse!" she hissed, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Her form flickered and wavered, as if struggling to maintain its shape. With a strength I didn't know I possessed, I stepped forward. "The people of Ebonwood have suffered enough, let them go." The witch stared at me for what felt like an eternity, her gaze piercing into my very soul. Finally she nodded, her expression softening ever so slightly. "Very well. The curse is lifted. But know this, mortal, curses are not so easily broken. There will always be a price. And with that, she vanished, leaving behind an eerie silence. The villagers were free, but the words of the witch haunted me. What price would I have to pay? As I left Ebonwood, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story was far from over. But for now, the village was safe, and that was enough. I returned to my life, forever changed by the experience. I knew then that I would have to return to Ebonwood to confront whatever lingering evil remained. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. I packed my bags, ready to face the unknown once more. As I boarded the train back to Ebonwood, I couldn't help but wonder what new mysteries awaited me. The village had changed me, and I knew that whatever happened next, I was prepared to face it. The vanishing village had become a part of me, a constant reminder that some stories never truly end. When I arrived in Ebonwood for the second time, the village looked different. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted somewhat, and the villagers, while still cautious, seemed less fearful. They greeted me with tentative smiles, their eyes reflecting a glimmer of hope. Over the next few days, I delved deeper into the history of the curse, uncovering details that had eluded me during my first visit. The witch, whose name was Elara, had been wronged in ways I hadn't fully understood. Her story was one of betrayal and vengeance, and the curse was her final act of defiance against those who had wronged her. I learned that Elara had been a healer, revered and respected by the villagers. But when a plague swept through Ebonwood, her remedies failed to cure the afflicted. Desperate for a scapegoat, the villagers turned on her, accusing her of witchcraft and condemning her to death. As she burned at the stake, she cursed the village, vowing that they would suffer as she had. Agnes and I gathered the villagers, explaining what we had learned and urging them to acknowledge the wrongs of the past. It was a difficult process, filled with tears and remorse, but slowly the villagers began to understand the need for atonement. We held a ceremony in the village square, a symbolic act of repentance. The villagers offered tokens of their remorse, laying them at the site where Elara had been executed. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the village, a sense of peace descended upon Ebonwood. The air was filled with a gentle warmth, and for the first time, I felt that we had truly made a difference. I awoke with a sense of clarity and purpose. Ebonwood was free from the curse, but my work was far from over. There were other stories to uncover, other mysteries to solve. As I said my goodbyes to Agnes and the villagers, I knew that I would always carry a part of Ebonwood with me. As I traveled back to my life, I reflected on the lessons I had learned. The vanishing village had taught me about the power of forgiveness and the importance of facing the past. It had shown me that some stories never truly end, but continue to evolve, shaping the lives of those who tell them. In the years that followed, I continued my work as a journalist, always seeking out the unexplained and the extraordinary. Each story brought new challenges and discoveries, but none would ever be quite like the tale of Ebonwood. The village, its people, and their struggle had left an indelible mark on my soul. And so I carried on, ever vigilant, ever curious, always ready to face the unknown. The vanishing village had become a part of me, a constant reminder that some stories never truly end, but continue to unfold, revealing new truths and deeper mysteries. And I knew that no matter where my journey took me, I would always be guided by the lessons I had learned in that haunted, resilient village.